The opinions expressed on the Custody Queen Show are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for personal, professional legal advice. The persons discussed are fictional and not based on actual clients.
Thought it was love, had kids in between. You can count on us, we're the Custody Queens. Yeah, you can count on us, we're the Custody Queens.
Good morning, everybody. It's Saturday, and you know what? I'm really feeling it today. We are going to have a great episode with a fellow attorney that has so much to share with us, and we also have Carrie Block, fellow Custody Queen.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm happy to be here again, and I'm happy to introduce a good friend of mine and an amazing criminal attorney, Fred Thiagarajah. And he's the founder and principal attorney for Right Choice Law, a group of former prosecutors all dedicated to criminal defense work. Fred was a former deputy DA and has been practicing criminal law exclusively for more than 20 years. He's done over 100 trials and brought those to verdict. He's also a member of Mensa, the High IQ Society, which I don't know if I believe in. Fred and his cases have been cited in numerous magazines and media outlets, including ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, Yahoo News, and we might talk about one or two of those throughout our segment
I'm
today.
excited for that.
So, Fred, why don't you explain to our audience what are your areas of practice and what do you do?
Well, first, thank you both for having me on this show. I'm very excited to be here. My primary focus is criminal defense. So I was a prosecutor for 4 years, and now for the last 20 years, I've been doing criminal defense almost exclusively. And that basically, the common crimes include drinking and driving, domestic violence, drugs, assault, theft, fraud, anything for which someone can get arrested. That's my bread and butter.
And what's your favorite part about being a criminal defense attorney?
I really like helping people. I mean, whether that's in, my personal life or my professional life, and this is an opportunity to help people when they are sometimes at their, they're in a corner, they're in a tough spot. There are consequences sometimes to their actions, and it feels just really good inside to be able to help someone out in need.
Yeah, and I know a lot of our listeners ask a lot of questions about restraining orders or, criminal convictions that they had prior to the marriage or 10 years ago. And so we thought it would be great to talk about how the two areas of law actually kind of meet sometimes. And it happens more often than not, especially with domestic violence. So we are super excited to have you, Fred.
Thank you. Yes. So domestic violence is one of these areas where there is a lot of overlap between family and criminal. Oftentimes when someone is accused of domestic violence and there are children involved, that opens up a family law case if the partner or the significant other wants to separate from the person accused of the abuse and retain custody of the children. As well as, that individual is facing potential criminal consequences. But the crazy thing about domestic violence is even if the two people want to stay together, the courts will sometimes issue protective orders keeping them apart. And sometimes, from what I understand, is social services will get involved and they'll say things like, it isn't always man abusing woman, but unfortunately that seems to be the more common type of case. So, for example, if a father has abused, a mother or allegedly abused a mother, social services will get involved and they'll tell that mom, you have to get a restraining order against the father. Otherwise, we're going to come in and grab your children. So even when, both parties want to work together, the courts sometimes force them apart. And that presents unique challenges for both family law attorneys as well as criminal defense attorneys.
Yeah, I had a case recently where that exact thing happened, and it basically, if my client didn't get a restraining order, she was told by, CPS that she was failing to protect the children. And, as any good attorney will not take a case that is not within their area of specialty. So whenever there's a criminal charge pending, I always say you need to get a criminal defense attorney and then we need to work together. But that is not something that we're willing to just take on because that's not our expertise. And we are not a jack of all trades. Any attorney that does that, be aware.
Any attorney who's a jack of all trades is usually a master of none, right?
Yes, I agree 100%. But it is unique when CPS does that, because the umbrella of abuse is so broad now, especially within the family law world. It can be, pictures, revenge porn, that kind of stuff. It's really crazy when CPS makes those decisions. I literally had a client said, CPS said I cannot go to therapy with him. I'm like, well, you have to do what CPS is saying, at least for the time being.
And sometimes we have to, in situations like that, we have to sort of, for the short term, follow along with what CPS says, but at the same time, keep long-term goals in mind. I should say one of the interesting differences between family and criminal, at least as it relates to domestic violence, I know you were mentioning that the spectrum of domestic violence now is very broad as considered by the family court. It can be emotional abuse, financial abuse, revenge porn. However, in criminal, it's almost entirely physical violence. So verbal and emotional abuse, while might be, considered, domestic violence by a family law judge, it's not really considered domestic violence. In the criminal world, you can't get charged with the crime of domestic violence for that.
Yeah, the crossover is interesting, and sometimes clients have a hard time understanding it. So that's why I always say, get a criminal attorney. Let's have a Zoom. Let's talk about what we do. But we do have to follow CPS for the time being. I sometimes I take issue when these couples want to go to therapy, and it wasn't, for lack of better words, a significant altercation. It was just an isolated incident. And when CPS kind of takes that position, and for everyone listening, CPS is Child Protective Services. Sometimes is it overstepping, overreach, but nonetheless, you have to kind of defer to them for at least the short term.
But there's many other situations, Fred, I assume, or I know actually, where you get involved within a family law case. So when CPS is not involved, when it's just maybe, I don't want to say run-of-the-mill domestic violence case, but what are those situations where you get involved regarding the interplay between what's going on in the criminal court and what's going on in the family law court, or even just cases that are strictly in the family law court?
So, as we were mentioning before, oftentimes when an individual is arrested for domestic violence, they'll have, pending criminal proceedings as well. And then usually there's, it only gets involved in family if there's children involved as well. So, regardless of whether the two partners, the two parents want to stay together or whether they're at odds with each other, there's going to be overplay between, criminal and family. Sometimes I'm working with the family law attorneys because the alleged victim and the alleged abuser want to stay together, and we're trying to find some path forward where we can get the charges dismissed in criminal and at the same time protect the children and family. But sometimes I'm working, in ways that are diametrically opposite the family law attorney. In cases where the alleged victim wants to, perhaps take control of the children, or rightly or wrongly, depending on whether or not the charges are true or false. And then what we have to do is we have to find a way to protect my client in criminal, because if he is convicted in criminal court, that can be used against him in family court, and he may lose custody, or there may be a finding that because he was found guilty of domestic violence, there may be a finding that can be used against him.
Yeah, and even before the conviction, generally if a domestic violence restraining order is filed in the family court, the criminal process can take a very long time. So if a restraining order is filed in the family court, you automatically get a trial date within 21 days, and then usually the accused or can get one continuance. But you have the family law court coming up before the criminal court, and you want a good attorney to tell you what to do, because what you file in the family court can be used against you in the criminal court. And do you want to take the stand? I mean, those are all questions that you should be having with your criminal defense attorney, because anything in the family court is going to be used against you in the criminal court.
That's an excellent point. And in fact, what I tell clients all the time on the criminal side is don't make any statements. I mean, that carries through from the very beginning. And that applies to any type of crime. If the police want to talk to you, just exercise your Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate yourself and don't make a statement. And there's reasons for that. And one of the reasons is the more times you make a statement, even if you're telling the truth, the more times you say the same thing, each time you say it, it's going to be said a little bit differently. And a clever attorney on the opposite side can catch these little inconsistencies in between statements and use them against you. So the general advice is you don't want to make any statements. But as you mentioned, if a restraining order comes up and now you have to file a response to the restraining order, you're sort of caught between a rock and a hard spot. Do you file a response on the restraining order side in order to preserve, in order to fight for custody of your children? Or do you hold back because every statement you make on the restraining order case could be used against you in the criminal case? And this is why it's so important to have an experienced criminal lawyer and family lawyer advocating for your case.
Yeah, I've seen some family law responses to a restraining order that, the attorney just wrote up probably, or their staff, and it's so easy to catch and it's probably true for the most part, but you catch the inconsistent statements, and it's little things like he was in the doorway, or the kids were in this room, and then you start reading the police report and you get the officer's testimony and it just doesn't add up. So you have to be very, very careful with what you say in the family court, and you have to sometimes weigh, do I file a response? Do I not file a response? That should be discussions that you should be having with a specialist on both sides. And if that is your case, you should be calling the Custody Queens at 1-800-419-7772. That is 1-800-419-7772. And Fred, how can our listeners find you?
You can go to my website, which is rightchoicelaw.com, or you can give us a call at 949-265-7005.
Do you have social media?
I am not sure. Certainly not as extensive and professional as your firm does. I'm not quite sure. It's something.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. Is probably the best way to describe it.
And what areas do you practice? Like all of Southern California? Do you go to Riverside? Do you go to San Bernardino, San Diego? What areas do you do?
So we do almost all of Southern California. And when I mentioned, when Carrie introduced me, she said that I am the founder of a law firm that consists of former prosecutors. So everybody in our office, we don't have any associates, I should say. It's all partners. All of us are former deputy district attorneys. All of us have at least 15 years of experience. We are all former DAs from different parts of Southern California. So for example, if there's a case in Ventura, one of my partners is a former deputy DA from Ventura County. I've got another one that's a former deputy DA from Los Angeles County, from Orange County. I know people who are former DAs in San Diego, in Riverside, San Bernardino. So no matter where your case is out of, anywhere in Southern California, we're going to have an attorney who's a former deputy DA, who's familiar with the judges, familiar with the prosecutors, that can handle your case to the best of their ability.
And we talk about how important that is a lot. You do not want an attorney going, for instance, I wouldn't take a case in San Francisco. I don't know how it works. I don't know how mediation works. I don't know the judges. I would be a fish out of water. So the fact that Fred has all of these partners in various counties that actually were DAs, that is huge, because it really makes a difference when you're going into a hometown court. There's the respect. It really, really makes a difference. And so that's why I always encourage people, do your homework, have multiple consultations, but find an attorney that is well known in that area. All right. So why don't you tell us one of your best stories of the last 20 years of doing criminal defense. Let's get a little juicy here.
All right, I'll tell you a case that meant a lot to me, and it was a homicide trial. Okay. So this was several years ago. I was defending somebody who's accused of first-degree murder. He was an inmate in the Orange County Jail, and unfortunately, he, along with 20 or 30 other inmates, beat a separate inmate to death. And they all came in and they kind of pushed this guy in an area where the cameras weren't covering, and they came at him 4 or 5 at a time. It was very graphic, very disturbing, and sadly
probably kept you up at night a little bit.
So this was my first homicide trial. The trial lasted 4 months. In Orange County in Santa Ana, and at the end of the trial, the the jury hung on the count of first degree, but they ended up convicting my client of second degree murder, and he's now serving 15 to life. And after he was convicted and sent to prison, he wrote me a letter from prison. I think it was around Christmas time he sent me the letter. And basically he just thanked me. He thanked me for representing him. He said, listen, I understand that my actions put myself in this situation. You know, I take that responsibility, but I saw how you poured your heart out into this trial, how you fought for me, and I want you to know I'm just so appreciative of what you did. I still have that card. It's like 15 years old now. And it made me feel good inside to know that sometimes I might not be able to change the outcome, but as long as I put in all the effort I can and fight the hardest I can for my clients, not only will I feel good about it inside here, but I can see that my clients will feel good about it as well.
And I love that because, you know, we'll get thank you cards. Sometimes I wish we got more, but sometimes I think our clients forget that we're humans too, you know, and I think on some level they think we're just this professional robot that does it, but they don't realize the long nights or the missed activities of our children and just how much anxiety and stress can go into preparing for a trial and hearings. And so when you get those cards, it means a lot. I think they're recognizing me on a human level as well, and I very much appreciate those. And you know, I love that. I love that he took responsibility, because good people can make bad choices, but it doesn't make them bad people, you know.
And I often say that we in family law are dealing with good people going through a really difficult time in their life and might not have the best behavior. And oftentimes I think that's, especially in the domestic violence realm, an overlap with the criminal, because they might have been a good person, but they were just pushed over an edge. And overall, they might not be the worst person and deserve the punishment that might follow it. So,
you know, sometimes clients make the wrong choice in what they do, but hopefully when they hire me, they'll make the right choice. RightChoiceLaw.com.
There you go. Look at that. So for everybody
I led you
listening,
right into that path there.
That
Fred.
was amazing. For everyone listening, go to RightChoiceLaw.com and make sure you have a consultation with Fred or one of his partners in every area of Southern California. But yeah, no, I agree. And I think with the domestic violence, sometimes when I see them, it's like you put yourself in you know, their shoes, and sometimes I lose it. Sometimes I'm angry. Sometimes I haven't slept in 3 or 4 days. And I'm like, that could happen. You know, I could have thrown something just because I was having a meltdown. And then sometimes there's very serious ones.
Or you look at the text messages that they're sending and you're like, gosh, I might have sent a very similar text message to my spouse. Okay, make sure we don't do that again.
Sure. I literally have learned over the last few years to not engage in text wars just because of what we do. You know, it's like, and then some attorneys will provide snippets and you're like, okay, that wasn't the whole conversation.
Exactly.
And
anything can be taken out of context.
Yes. So I always tell my clients, when you send that text or that email, how does this help me and how does this hurt me? And literally put Kristen in your head, and a lot of clients follow that and it helps them. But you know, I agree. I think a lot of clients that we get are in such a desperate and dark place in their life, and they're pushed over the edge. And I think a lot of good people make bad decisions, and I think that's kind of how they end up with you too.
You know, I was mentioned that you know, oftentimes your clientele are just sort of, I guess, ordinary folk, I should say. But even professionals, even attorneys can sometimes be, you know, going through very hard divorces. I personally went through a very litigious divorce, and sadly, you know, even though I'm an attorney, and even though I deal with these things, or, you know, somewhat related types of cases, I found myself making the exact same mistakes that, you know,
that you would tell your client not to do.
Yeah. For example, you're mentioning, you know, don't send crazy text messages to your ex. But hey, when it's me personally and it's when my child is involved, sometimes I send, you know, text messages that I wish I could take back.
Guilty.
Yeah. So it can happen to anyone, and that's why it's so important to have you know, experienced and calming family law attorneys like custody queens on your side to manage not just your family law case, but to manage your emotions as well, and to keep you on, you know, the straight and narrow so they can achieve the best results for your case.
you know what? You like stole like our headline right there for the best results for your case. But you know, Sam's not here with us. Don't worry, everybody. She will be back next week. But yeah, Sam and I and Carrie and the rest of our Custody Queens team, we have probably like 10 attorneys now. But we make it our mission to not just obviously be the litigators. We help them. You know, do you need a therapist? Can we give you some referrals? You know, clearly we can help with the litigation, but you need to see someone about how to control your emotions, because we can't go into trial like this. You know, how do we help make this process less negative and less traumatic? That's really my goal. I wish divorce wasn't so taboo and still such a negative thing. People grow apart. It happens. And how do we do it in a way that doesn't make everyone fall apart? Did you have kids in your case?
Yes, I have one daughter. She's 11 and a half. Fortunately, we're at 50-50 custody. Awesome. And you know, I mean, at the end of the day, you say it often, but it really is true. It's about the children. And, you know, my daughter is happy. She's loved. And that's the most important.
Yeah. And you know, my daughter was telling me how one of her friend's parents were divorced, and I've talked about this previously, but I'm even just engaging the conversation with her, you know, like, this is normal. There's 2 houses. She has 2 parents that love her. She just has to go back and forth, but this is okay. This is normal. So that way, you know, the first time she said it was like, Mom, you know, so-and-so's parents are divorced. It's so sad. So I'm trying to explain it to an 8-year-old, but I'm like, it's okay. This, you know, look at so-and-so's parents, and they both come to the soccer games. And I think if we just normalized it, and
I think actually the taboo surrounding divorce is much more faded than it was at least when I was growing up.
Agreed.
You know,
like 10 years ago, it was still so like the stigma.
Well, when I started
it was
practicing,
like a scarlet
30
letter.
years ago when I started practicing, it was completely taboo, and now it's much more that kids understand it more, and the way you explain it to a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old and a 20-year-old child are completely different. And I mean, I always said to little kids that would say that to me, well, you know what? They get 2 birthdays because they're going to do birthday at mom's house and birthday at dad. They're getting 2 Christmases. And so my kids were like, well, wait, maybe that sounds kind of cool.
I totally think I had that conversation with, you know, one of my parents or something at some point. But you know, it's you know, we look on a soccer team, there's 3 or 4 parents that are divorced. So I'm trying to explain, like, look, so and everyone comes to the game. You know, for the most part, there's no conflict. But if it's really about the kids, and that is why I do custody, and that's why I prefer these custody cases, because I look at my kids and I see how important these kids are in their futures, and all of the conflict, it truly, if it's not under control, it has everlasting effects.
Well, I think at the end of the day, you know, at least this is what I believe, is it's much more important for a child to be in 2 happy, separate households than one, you know, household full of conflict and
they feel it.
Happiness.
They know what's going on. Kids are so smart. But I agree, if you have 2 parents in a household and they're fighting, it's much better for the parents.
And I often say to a client, is that what you want your child to see as their future marriage? Because what they see is what they're going to expect in the future, and they're going to emulate. And if it's an unhappy household, well, do you really want your child having that forever? If it's 2 happy households, that would be much better.
All right, well, we only have a few more minutes before the end of the show, but don't worry, Fred is coming back for part 2 with Carrie and Sam. But I am going to ask Fred a question from our CQ Talk box. I know I've talked about this before, but in a nutshell, it's a box of cards. It stimulates conversation. It elicits information that you may never have otherwise known from whoever you're having this conversation with. I do it with my 5-year-old, my 8-year-old. You know, Carrie and I could do it at lunch. You can do it with anyone, but it really engages conversation, and it forces you to listen to who you're having the conversation with. And I really am excited about this, and it will be available to the public very soon. But Fred, I'm going to dive in here. This is a reflection card.
Okay, wait. Is it from the box of the 5-year-old cards or the 8-year-old cards?
This is the adult.
We thought the 8-year-old
This is the adult box. This is the X-rated. No, just kidding. No, this is the adult box. So I'm going to ask you a tough question here. What are you not willing to compromise on?
My honesty.
I love that.
And my fantasy football picks.
You know, my husband would probably agree with you on this. I think that might be his number 1. All right, Carrie, what about you? What are you not willing to compromise?
I would agree with the honesty. That's probably the most important things, just my morals and ethics and what I believe in. And I've had situations where a client wants to do something that I don't. Yeah, and I will choose to get out of the case before I do something that will affect my reputation and everything in the community.
Agreed. Mine is same as your guys' integrity, like who we are. And we're all at the point in our careers where we take cases that we want to take. We don't just take people that call. We don't take every case. All of us are on this journey with you, and we need to have the trust. But same thing, I had talked to someone the other day, and it wasn't even a trust issue. It was like, this is all the money I have, and in my head I know that he's probably borrowing money and probably asking for anyone that can help him, but I knew that wasn't going to put a dent in what he needed to be done, and I knew it was probably his life savings. And so I said, hey, I don't want to take your money. Not that I can't help you, but I just don't think that I can do enough for that.
Can I also mention something? I want our watchers to know that we're not worse attorneys because we have integrity. We're better attorneys because we have integrity. Number one, the fact that we're honest is not going to stop us from providing just passionate and zealous representation on behalf of our clients. But more importantly, the courts know who the honest attorneys are and who the dishonest lawyers are. And so when you've got this reputation of having integrity, you're going to get a lot further with opposing counsel, with the judges, with everything on your case. So this idea, I think some people have that, if my attorney is not willing to fudge things for me, maybe they're not, a good attorney. It's the exact opposite. You want attorneys that have impeccable reputations, and you can only get that by being honest all the time.
Agreed. And there's a lot of bad attorneys out there. There's a lot of dishonest attorneys, and you can't go to their level. When they do it, you document it in writing. You tell your client why you're not responding, or what your action plan, what your custom case strategy is. But the judges know. They can see it through the paperwork. They can read through the lines. And if an attorney tells you this is a flat fee for a divorce, they are either a very bad attorney, potentially a disbarred attorney illegally practicing, or they're being dishonest with you. Because I can't tell you how many people call us after they've hired an attorney who told them it was going to be, say, $4,000 for the case, and then 2 weeks into the process, it's like, well, I need $20,000. All of us, when you have a consultation with either Fred or the custody queens, we come up with a custom case strategy that tells you what you can expect at every level, financially and strategically. So that way there is no questions. You're not wondering, hey, when are they going to ask for more money? I am going to tell you exactly, or whoever the attorney is, you're going to know. Communication is key. And like I said, we're on this journey together.
Yep, we set expectations at the beginning.
Absolutely. All right, guys, that was the quickest show ever. Sometimes I'm like, we need an hour, but that was a great show. And Fred, thank you for joining us. I know we have a part 2 coming up, and Miss McBride will be joining you guys. But everyone, thank you for listening. We will have Fred's information on our Instagram if you miss it. But Fred, go ahead and give the website one more time. RightChoiceLaw.com. That's RightChoicelaw.com. And the phone number. 949-265-7005. Well, I can tell you, Fred, if I ever get in trouble, I'm going to be calling you. But I hope I don't need you on a professional level.
We don't need Fred.
I hope I don't need him, but I'm going to put it on speed dial just in case. And, make the call. And I always say, make sure you hire an expert. Make sure you hire someone you trust. So thank you, everybody, for joining us this Saturday and every Saturday on Go Country 105. Make sure you call us at 1-800-419-7772. That is 1-800-419-7772. You can also fill out a web form on custodyqueens.com, and we will make sure we get back to you. And remember, let love rule.